On December 3, 1993, a funeral procession took place in Medellin, Colombia. But it was not an ordinary one. The man being buried was none other than the notorious drug lord, who was considered the most powerful of all time. To some, he was known as Robin Hood, while others labeled him as a terrorist and drug lord. The event drew a massive crowd of 25,000 mourners, and both the Colombian police and army were present to maintain order. The question arises, why did so many people turn out to pay their respects to the world's most wanted criminal? What was the reason behind the chaos and sadness that day? To uncover the answers, and to learn more about the funeral of the biggest drug lord, watch this video. Don Pablo Escobar's death was a horrifying event, marking the end of his 16-year reign as a drug kingpin. He had been on the run from everyone, including the Colombian and American governments and his cartel rivals, and was wanted by all. However, there was a major issue. No one knew his whereabouts. The CIA had already taken control of Pablo's family and was waiting for him to make a fatal mistake. On December 2, 1993, Pablo took the risk of calling his son, knowing that it could be his last chance to speak to him. It's possible that he sensed the end was near and wanted to hear from his loved ones before his demise. The CIA's objective was to locate Pablo in Barrio Los Olivos, a Medellin neighborhood. After an intervention by the Colombian Army and American Special Forces, they engaged in a gunfight with the only bodyguard and Pablo. Both were killed, and the cheering army erupted in Viva Colombia, which was heard over the radio. The public's reaction to the death of the infamous drug lord was mixed. On one hand, there was a sense of relief that the notorious criminal was no longer a threat. On the other hand, there were concerns about the ongoing drug trade and the impact of Pablo Escobar's demise on the cartel's operations. It was 16 months since his escape from prison that the authorities were finally able to take down Pablo Escobar. As soon as the news of Pablo Escobar's death spread throughout the nation, there was a great deal of turmoil and unrest. The news was so significant that it awakened people from every corner of the country. The announcement of his death spread like a plague, and news channels could not say anything but, "Pablo Escobar has been shot dead," or "The drug lord is no longer alive on Colombian soil." Radio channels were broadcasting the news non-stop, and the message was clear: Escobar was no more. The crowd's reaction to Pablo Escobar's death was a mix of sadness and admiration. On the one hand, there was a sense of loss and suffering, as many people in Colombia had been impacted by his drug trafficking empire. However, on the other hand, there were those who admired him for his generous reputation and the way he had helped the poor. As news of Pablo Escobar's death spread, people started to emerge on the streets to pay their respects. It was not just a myriad of people who showed up. Rather, they were followers of Escobar, who had come to hail their caring lord. While he was a ruthless cocaine baron to the government and to the people of the hillside of Medellin, he was a hero. Despite the illegal nature of his activities, he had helped many people in impoverished areas and had become a symbol of hope and resistance against the corrupt government. The legacy of Pablo Escobar was controversial, as some viewed him as a hero, while others saw him as a notorious criminal who brought devastation to their communities. While some view him as a ruthless criminal, others remember him as a philanthropist who gave generously to the poor. During his funeral, which was attended by thousands of people, the Colombian people paid their last respects to this polarizing figure. The attendees included both friends and family of Escobar, as well as many of his supporters. Many of them wore t-shirts with his image or carried signs declaring their loyalty to him. The sheer size of the crowd was overwhelming, so much so that the car carrying the drug lord's family was unable to make it through to the funeral. They were forced to turn back, leaving the family to mourn in private. The scene was one of both sadness and admiration, as people grappled with their complicated feelings towards the man who had both terrorized and helped their communities. The death of Pablo Escobar not only had a significant impact on his family and friends, but it also attracted intense media attention. 2 days after his death, his body was taken to a local morgue in Medellin, Colombia, where his family paid their respects before fleeing the scene, as reporters and enemies surrounded the funeral. Thousands of mourners gathered to bid their last farewell to the infamous drug lord. Due to the possibility of retaliation from Pablo Escobar's associates, the Colombian police were in a state of heightened alert following his death. As a precautionary measure, the funeral was heavily guarded, with police setting up roadblocks and checkpoints in the surrounding vicinity. Despite these security measures, a bombing incident took place at a nearby shopping center, resulting in the injury of multiple individuals. The situation was tense, and authorities were on high alert to prevent any further violent outbursts. Despite attempts by the authorities to maintain order, the mourners were outraged and some of them fought back, attempting to push their way into the funeral. The burial was carried out with such urgency that the priest was unable to perform the last rites due to the pressure from the crowd. The family of Pablo Escobar faced numerous challenges and hardships, as they were constantly living in fear due to the pressure from the government and the enemy. The situation became even more difficult when reporters ambushed the family, accusing them of various wrongdoings. It was a traumatic experience for the family, especially for Escobar's son, who spoke out about the overwhelming emotions they were facing. His son expressed that they were simply trying to lead normal lives for the sake of his mother, sister, and himself. However, the past 24 hours had been the most intense and traumatic experience of their lives. Not only had they lost their family head in a violent way, but they also had to deal with constant fear and pressure from all sides. The situation of the Escobar family highlighted the complex and dangerous nature of living in a world where crime and corruption are rampant. The pain and trauma they faced served as a reminder of the harsh realities people can face when living in such environments. At the funeral, the former Colombian president Cesar Gaviria was in attendance. He had played a key role in the operation that led to Escobar's death, and was present to pay his respects to the victims of Escobar's criminal empire, which had caused immense violence and suffering in the country. His presence at the funeral was a significant statement, demonstrating his commitment to bringing an end to the violence and chaos that had plagued Colombia during Escobar's reign. Despite the bitter history between them, he acknowledged the harm caused by Escobar's criminal empire and sought to show empathy and respect towards the families affected by Pablo's actions. The death of Pablo Escobar marked a turning point for the drug trade in Colombia, as the game was changing and everyone wanted to take control of this lucrative industry. In an effort to quell the violence and chaos that had plagued the country for so long, the government took Pablo Escobar's family into custody and began cracking down on drug dealers across the nation. A person of colossal stature with varying opinions about his character and actions, Pablo Escobar was a divisive and contentious figure in Colombian society. Some individuals viewed him as a philanthropist who utilized his power and wealth to aid the underprivileged and oppressed members of his community. However, others opposed him, viewing him as a violent and unethical drug dealer involved in criminal activities. The mention of Pablo Escobar's name can trigger strong emotions among Colombians, with some considering him a disgraceful figure akin to Hitler's notoriety for Germans. This sentiment has caused frustration among Colombians, who feel that their passports receive unnecessary scrutiny and attention due to Escobar's actions. In the decades since his death, there's a disparity of opinions on whether Pablo Escobar should be viewed as a heroic figure or a source of terror. What is your perspective on this issue? Should Pablo Escobar be remembered as a celebrated figure or a cautionary tale?